Hello, everybody. It's Aftermath Carbon here with another video for you today. So today we actually got a pretty sweet one that we're coming forward with. We got the announcement of ZeroSpace, and me and Theory actually talked about this in our most recent episode of our podcast, the afterWard podcast, which will be linked below if you haven't watched that yet. Um, but after being a part of the Discord and kind of looking more into this, I wanted to just make a video talking specifically about the game, my first impressions, some of things I'm excited for, some of the things that I may that may be difficult in the coming months for the game. But we're just gonna jump right into it here. So I'm on the Kickstarter page right now, and as you see in the Canadian, they've already hit $348,000 raised in I think like 2 days, which is pretty unreal. I think their initial plan was $100,000 USD, which they hit within like 5 hours, and then they just crushed past 250,000 USD within like a day and a half, and it's still climbing. And they have a whole month to continue raising funds. So as you can tell, there is a massive demand for an RTS game within this space, because this team, if you look at their Twitter page, they didn't have a massive following going into this. They're not a huge developer. They didn't have crazy backing. They started yesterday with like, I don't know, 200 followers by the time they launched their actual Kickstarter. So this is fully just off the back of player-driven hype. You can tell people are excited for an RTS in the space, and it's going to be nice to see them try to capitalize on that alongside their competitor Stormgate, which we'll cover in another video. This one is going to be specifically about our friends here at ZeroSpace. So getting right into it, my first opinion of this game from the looks around is, as you can see from this little cinematic here, is it's very similar to StarCraft 2. Like, you can see a lot of very similar looking units, which I'm okay with, right? Because when you look at the RTS genre, you can't. It's hard to get overly creative and try to be new and innovative with all this brand new stuff when it's already kind of been done before within this sort of setting, right? If you want it to be some sort of galactic space fight like you have here, you really only have a few options of how you can actually approach that. So I'm okay with seeing similar units. And I think there's going to be a lot of differentiating things as well. Like, this is still pre-alpha, so who knows what these skins will look like or what the game will look like on launch. But just initial thoughts is that, okay, this looks like close to a carbon copy of StarCraft 2, but that's good, right? Because StarCraft 2 did a lot of things right, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything. But when we get into it, you'll see that ZeroSpace is actually reinventing the wheel in a lot of aspects. So design-wise, it's okay to kind of take that step back, but I think this is going to be really good as we dive deeper into it. So the first thing that I noticed to me is that it's basically the love child of StarCraft 2, Warcraft 3, and Dota in a sense, right? With a crazy campaign. Like, the campaign in this game is actually unbelievable. We'll break that down in a minute here. But if you look through it, going through the entire thing, they have a lot of different features that I think is going to be really amazing. That's going to set this game apart. But I think it's going to be very hard for it to balance as an esport. So if you're looking at this, the open world campaign, 13 main mission stories, 14 hero missions. So I'm guessing each hero has their own sort of story behind them. And then 40 side story arcs. And that's on launch. And I'm pretty sure they've already talked about wanting to expand that campaign pretty early on. So they have a lot of cinematics that they'll have going in there. Interactive dialogue, which is sweet. We'll talk about that more in the video as well. But basically, their campaign is an RTS that plays out like an RPG where your decisions make a difference in the outcome of the game. For the actual gameplay side of things, you have 4 main factions with 10 buildings or 10 units and 9 buildings each. And then you have 6 mercenary factions with 4 to 5 units each, which is part of the base game. Then you have 14 heroes on launch, and you have 1 versus 1 and 3 versus 3 ranks. So jumping right into the esports side of things, because I'm a former StarCraft 2 pro gamer and I run an esports org, so that's kind of where my main focus goes when I get excited about a game. This is going to be very difficult to balance. When you have 4 factions, trying to balance that into itself to be like a competitive market is very difficult on the offset, right? Because you're always going to have this weird balance, trying to make sure that if a specific unit is really powerful in one matchup, if you tweak that and nerf it a bit, it doesn't make it completely unplayable in other matchups, right? So in StarCraft, we had this issue, right? Where, say, like late game Protoss versus Zerg, you had Infestor Broodlord that was incredibly hard to beat. But Brood Lords didn't see almost any action in PvT back in early Wings of Liberty, right? So it was hard for them to properly balance those units to make them still viable and not completely obsolete in other matchups. And that was only with 3 races, right? So you throw in another race here, that already makes it just so much more difficult to balance. And then on top of that, you also have the 6 mercenary factions, right? So same thing there. Depending how that plays out, if that has to get balanced properly with all these other factors, it's going to be very difficult. And then you throw in the 14 heroes as well, right? So the 14 heroes is a little bit easier because you only get 1 per match, and I'm sure they're going to be very specific depending on how you decide to play the game out. The 14 heroes will be a little bit easier to tweak because it's a singular unit. But when you have 4 factions and 6 mercenary factions, and on top of that, there's like a skill tree sort of aspect to it, which I think they only cover in one of the videos. But it adds so much diversity to the game where it's going to be a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but as far as a highly competitive, like tier 1 esport, I think it might be very difficult to patch properly and balance properly. What you're going to find is that the meta list game they're trying to create, because it's what it's going to do, right? They have so much option per game. Every single game is going to feel different, right? Which feels awesome when you're playing it, but at the same time, too, that in itself is going to create the meta where things are specifically the best, and that's all the players are going to play, right? So as a casual side, yeah, a lot of fun to it. It's going to be a great part for casual gamers that are getting into it. It'll be a lot of fun, but it's going to be just different in the sort of pro gaming landscape, because I think you are going to have these strategies emerge and the best set of options come to fruition, like you do with every game, and you're going to see the same things repeated over and over and over again, because that's the best way to play the game out, right? But on launch, it'll be fun because before the game gets ironed out, obviously, it's going to take a while before those strategies kind of come to life, right? Another thing that's a little bit different here too is you have gain experience and level up your faction by capturing control towers, then unlock and unleash powerful support skills. So I don't know if this is game by game as you level up, or the more you play, you like unlock a certain level for the entirety of that. So if you play the one alien race, I think they're called the Grell. If you play that a bunch and say you have 1,000 games and you max that level out, are you going to be significantly more powerful than someone that's just trying to learn Grell and they're like level 10, or is this game by game, right? Because that's another aspect of like adding the balance into it, which will be difficult, and then just the skill, or so not the skill, but like the time difference that equates to a better advantage, right? So still a lot of stuff early on that is going to be somewhat difficult to balance on the esports side of things, but it does create a really cool dynamic overall, right? So outside of my opinions about it being an esport, because like I said, that's kind of where my mindset goes to immediately, I think this campaign looks unbelievable. They really talk about it within this Kickstarter here, which will be linked down below, obviously. But it's very interactive, very ever-changing landscape with their campaign. I do believe you can play it with friends up to 3 people, which is going to be great for community building. And just the depth of it too. I think they're going to make it replayable on more difficulties, add things in that'll make it so you don't play the campaign one time, finish the story, and then take off and never touch it again, right? But there's still a lot more to come out on the development of the campaign. But I think this is a great additive to a game that's usually focused on its online ladder 1 versus 1 kind of setting. So this Galactic Warfare is another massive undertaking that I'm excited to see how it kind of takes part. So if you read right here, the Galactic Warfare takes your role beyond a traditional commander. Join guilds, form alliances, and partake in a galactic-sized tug of war that is set in a persistent galaxy map that hosts thousands of players. That's crazy. So what that sounds like to me, what we talked about on the podcast, that sounds like EVE Online, where you have these massive worlds that are open for conquering, and you have thousands of players fighting for it. That's going to be insane if they're able to pull that off. I think depending on how the dynamics of that work, your computer's going to blow up if you don't have something that's good enough to handle that. Because 1,000 players playing an RTS game if you're building full armies to take this on, or with just singular heroes within the game, I think that's going to be an insane experience if they pull that off. Um, yeah, the Galactic Warfare is a stretch goal. While our team has experience creating large connected multiplayer worlds, achieving this ambitious goal requires additional support from your passionate backers. So, I mean, they're already seeing the support from the backing. They've already raised 250% of their initial goal. So, I think with the proper backing and a proper amount of support on release, I can't imagine this coming with the game on launch because it's such a lofty goal that I think they're trying to just build the fundamentals of the game first and then ship this type of stuff later on. Because they've even said within this Kickstarter that they want to add, I think, every 6 months or every, bi-yearly, a game-changing sort of update twice a year. And this could be one of these things added every 6 months or so, right? The good thing that we have here is that they're utilizing a lot of StarCraft 2 pro gamers. So you got Pig, you got Cats, you got Scarlet in here. There was a longer list as well, but having even just these three players on here, um, I think Giant Grant Games is the actual developer itself, but having players with the background that these three players here have, they're going to be able to keep the competitive side at the forefront so that it's not kind of lost in the fun and just casual side of things, because obviously you want your game to be fun, but if you want it to be an esport, which RTS fits in perfectly as a competitive genre, I think having these sort of people on board is going to help them significantly with the things moving forward. Like Katz has been a part of the StarCraft space since, I believe, even back like Brood War, right? And he was huge in StarCraft 2. Scarlet, one of the best players to ever touch the game. Pig, huge content creator, has done a lot of great things for himself as well. I think off the rip, that's a great cast of people to be working on the game with, and having advisors like that on a project is just fundamental for trying to build something from the ground up in a specific direction you want to take it. Um, yeah, this let's talk about. This is going to be two major game transforming updates annually. So I think this is more talking about balancing and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. It'll keep the game fresh, right? It'll be because when they do these massive changes, right, twice a year, that's every 6 months roughly. I'd imagine those are going to be taking all the massive complaints people have and trying to change those around, and the entire meta is going to shift. So, alongside this game having so much depth to it in its options and its choices, changing the game twice a year is going to also keep it fresh as far as how it's played out. I know a lot of people kind of might be against that depending on how they balance it. Like if your main class does get nerfed into the ground somehow and you have to change up how you play it entirely, that might not be great for you, but that is an important part of an RTS, especially in a competitive landscape. So overall, with the understanding we have right now, right, we only have the two factions right now, the Protectorate and the Grell. There's two more to be announced, and we'll get a lot more gameplay understanding in the future here, right? But as more things start to kind of come out, and we're seeing the team behind it, and seeing the community support behind it, and also having Stormgate launching shortly before this game as well, it's going to create a very good competitive landscape in the RTS space that even StarCraft 2 didn't have, right? Because StarCraft back in its heyday was the only RTS. It was the only one on the market, so you had one choice, which was you played StarCraft, right? So with this one here, it's going to keep both these games in check, where they have to try and appease to their audience, because if they don't like, say, what ZeroSpace is doing or what Stormgate's doing, they'll just cross over and play the other ones or go back to StarCraft 2, right? So it's going to create a good, unique landscape that I'm really excited for. I think this game is really good with the depth that they're putting into it. And I also think that the competitive side, if they get that balance right, I think it's going to be huge. And I forgot to mention too, like I said, there is a whole video here that we're not going to watch in this video, but it goes into the fact that there's a pick and ban phase at the beginning of every competitive game. So I think that alone actually does help a lot with the balancing, now that I'm kind of thinking about that on the fly. Because if there is certain aspects of the game that are just overly broken, you can just ban it out, right? And then play a different strategy around that. So that actually solves a pretty big issue. So after I think about that now, it might not be as hard to balance as I initially thought, but we'll just have to see how that comes out to play. And if they get that right, I think this game is going to be wildly successful. I think it already has been within the short amount of time it's been announced. They've raised a lot of capital. People are excited. The Discord's blowing up. If you're not in there yet, I'll link their whole link tree in the description of this video below. But I do suggest checking them out. If you've never played an RTS game before or seen the landscape of esports with an RTS in it, it's a lot of fun. I think it's something that we're missing right now. And I think with having two big looking great style RTS games coming out pretty close to each other, it's going to be a game changer for development studios, for esports, for fans, for casual players across the board, because it's been about, what, 12, 13 years since a new RTS title has dropped with StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. That was the last one, and that game unfortunately is dead. So yeah, as a former RTS pro gamer, I'm really excited for what they have coming down the pipeline here. I think this is a great turn of events for everybody involved. I'm excited for both these games, ZeroSpace and Stormgate. I'm going to play them both. I've already pledged my 165, I'll show you here, for the Sector Overlord, only because it gives you the alpha access. So I'll be jumping into this game in December when they launch the keys, and I will be playing it and giving feedback to the best of my ability. I'd imagine there'll be an NDA, so I won't be able to talk about it right away, but I'm looking forward to get in there, do my part, support them the best way I can. And yeah, well, I'm excited to see what they bring to the table, and I'm excited for Aftermath to be part of it. We'll most certainly be fielding a lot of players and content creators in both ZeroSpace and in Stormgate, and I'm looking forward to it. So I appreciate the ramble video. I know this is going on like 16 minutes without editing. It's just wanting to get more of my thought process out in the virtual space for people to also check this game out, have another set of opinions about what's going on here. So if this was helpful, if you want to learn more about the coming games, ZeroSpace and Stormgate, I'm going to be covering a lot of that on my channel here, as well as what we're doing with our podcast over at Aftermath Esports YouTube channel. So once again, if you guys enjoyed it, feel free to follow, subscribe, like, comment, ask questions. I love interacting with the chat. Follow us on all the socials, and also make sure to participate with ZeroSpace. Follow them wherever they have socials, and yeah, do your part to make sure this is a great success. All right, thanks guys. Take it easy. We'll see you in the next one.